You're live.
Okay. Assalamu alaikum everyone. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alamin. Wa salatu wa salam ala Sayyidina Muhammadin wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in. Inshallah, today we are continuing our panel discussion series, and inshallah, today we have another topic. I am particularly excited about this topic, worship, why we need it, because it is something that really ties the topics around Iman, around belief, together into an actionable item. So, in that sense, inshallah, it is something that we need to speak about. So, again, as the subject implies, the today's topic is about worship, and of course, it's not going to be around if you know about Risale Nur and how it approaches things. It's not about the mechanics or how we do worship. It is more about why we do the worship. So, in that sense, inshallah, we'll speak about why does belief, iman, necessitate worship, and also, if time permits, we'll go into how human social life also necessitate worship. So these are interesting topics that is connected to why we need worship. And as I said, I'm not as good in giving lengthy introductions as Brother Baikar is, but in that sense, inshallah, I'll try to give some small introduction because I'll be replacing him for this week. He had to attend another call, but we have valuable uh, panelists today. Kolnabi from UK and Fatuna from Durham, North Carolina. So I guess both of them could be from Durham, but they might be pronouncing them differently, Durham or Durham. I don't know. In Boston, they would call it Durham, I guess. But anyways, um, in any case, in terms of the worship, as I said, it is something that is needed. It is something that we. Um, 1 second, please. I have a small technical issue here. I hope, okay. So the worship, it is something that connects all the things that we have been discussing. So because it is again something that is actionable, something that we do. Um, but again, it is sometimes, when we discuss matters of belief, matters of tafakkur, matters of reflection, um, we sometimes neglect to mention the other part of the equation. How do we keep it refreshed? And how do we keep things going? So in that sense, it is indeed an interesting topic, I imagine. And also in the US, we will be going into the week of Thanksgiving, which is about, again, a type of worship, giving thanks, shukr. So in that sense, I think it's also timely for our attendees from the US. So we will discuss this week a few some parts from the tafsir, Saleh Nur, and specifically the tafsir of Surah Baqarah verses 21-22. This is from the book Asharatul Ijaz, Signs of Miraculousness. So inshallah, there is a portion there because this verse is about also worship, and inshallah, we will try to discuss how these and we will try to discuss this text and how we answer those two questions that we posed in the beginning. So Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. يا أيها الناس اعبدوا ربكم الذي خلقكم والذين من قبلكم لعلكم تتقون الذي جعل لكم الأرض فراشا والسماء بناء وأنزل من السماء ماء فأخرج به من الثمرات رزقا لكم فلا تجعلوا لله أندادا وأنتم تعلمون. So this is the Arabic. the origin of the verse, and the meaning is, O you people, worship your Lord and Sustainer, who has created you and those who lived before you, so that you might remain conscious of Him, who has made the earth a resting place for you and the sky a canopy, and has sent down water from the sky, and thereby brought forth fruits for your sustenance. Then set not up rivals to Allah when you know the truth. And inshallah, I'll try to also read the first part after this, and then I'll go back and inshallah take um, take comments. Introduction. You should know that it is worship that instills tenets of belief in the believers, making them a very part of their character. For if matters pertaining to the conscience and reason, the belief matters that are pertaining to the conscience and reason, are not nurtured and strengthened by worship, which consists of carrying out Allah's commands and abstaining from His prohibitions, they remain ineffectual and weak. The present state of the Islamic world testifies to this. You know too that worship is the cause of happiness in this world and the next, and is a means of ordering life here and there, in this world and the next, and a cause of attainment and perfection, both individual and collective. It is an exalted, esteemed relation between creator and bondsman. There are several reasons worship is the cause of happiness and prosperity in this world, which is the tillage of the hereafter. So after this, inshallah, he'll go into a bit of a detail and a chain of logic. But before that, I would like to discuss, inshallah, these parts because these are actually pretty loaded statements and heavy. I mean, each sentence I imagine here can open up a discussion by itself. So, inshallah, I'll try to first focus on these, starting with the verse. Again, it is about worship, and there is a connection to faith because you might remain conscious of Him. So, worship, the verse points that, and there is that tafsir around this. So, inshallah, we can first start with Colin Abi. Would you like to start us off, like about your thoughts about this verse and this part about how worship instills tenets of belief in people?
Inshallah. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. The verse is interesting. We are commanded to act worshipfully as conscious servants to the one who sustains and nurtures us. The Arabic Rab, the use of Rab in this verse is telling because it's through the acknowledgement and recognition of our position as Marbub, the one who is sustained and nurtured at all times and in all ways. It's through that we can best come to understand our existential place in the cosmic scheme, our place as the created beings, as makhluqat, who are able, through the manifestations of the Creator, to serve as mirrors, not only so that the Creator can observe His own beauty in creation, but also for the creation to apprehend and to worship the one whose beauty and whose perfections actually demand a worshipful response. This may sound rather convoluted and oblique, but in short, what I'm saying, I think, is that one who is deserving of love, of adoration, of glorification, of exaltation, of worshipfulness and conscious servitude, one who is deserving of all of these things must, by default, be in a relationship with creatures who are able to do all of these things, glorify, exalt, worship, and serve consciously and through their own volition. Because it's only conscious worship that can complete the circle. so to speak. You know that God is able to be worshipped and glorified by angels and by the rest of the creation, but there is only one being who is able to worship God voluntarily as a conscious, full-length mirror held up to the divine, and that is humankind.
Yeah.
So this was the reason for the creation of Adam, alayhi salam, which means by extension the creation of you and me. So God is in and of himself a nurturer and a sustainer. And since this is the case, not only must there be creatures who are nurtured and sustained, but there must also be creatures to apprehend this, to understand this intellectually and emotionally, and then to respond to it with conscious love, conscious servitude, and conscious worship.
So, yeah, indeed. I mean, if I were to summarize your remarks, then maybe we have these angels, for example, who are conscious, but they are not able to experience all the different, sustenance or that aspects of the rububiyyah, of the lordship of God. So they are conscious, but their worship is not full. At the other hand, they are like animals who are being sustained, but they are not really conscious of their worship. So it's almost like human being is that connecting line that connects this with the both being conscious and also being sustained and experiencing all these bounties in a level that is higher than an angel would. Can we like summarize it like that maybe? Or like, is it a way to say that as well?
No, I think you're right. We're told to be servants, we're told to accept conscious servitude so that we can achieve God awareness, God consciousness. And such a state can only come about through our comprehending the nature of servitude, the fact that we are makhluk, marbub, faqir, ajiz, and so on. Servitude, being a servant, doesn't only mean carrying out acts. Firstly and foremostly, as I think that you are saying, it means cultivating in yourself an attitude of conscious civility. It means being aware of our place in the cosmic scheme. As you said, the angels are aware, but they're not aware that they're aware. Our job is to be aware that we are aware, and to nurture to cultivate this sense of conscious servitude, being aware of our place, and particularly aware of our position vis-a-vis the Creator. This is a relationship. It's a relationship between Khaliq and Makhluk, between Rab and Marbub, between the one who is Ghani and we who are Faqir, and so on. So understanding the dynamics of that relationship and what that relationship requires, I think, is the larger part of servitude, and understanding what it means to be a servant is itself servitude. That is the core meaning of worship, as far as I understand it. Otherwise, God doesn't need servitude in the way that an earthly king needs slaves or servants. And I think we go wrong when we imagine the servility of slaves to be the kind of servitude implied by the words abd and ibadah. God doesn't need to be served in that way.
Yeah, yeah, indeed, fine point there. Jazakallah. Um, Mustafa abi, would you like to add to this or also?
Yeah, sure. I mean, not to add, but to perhaps try to maybe paraphrase. I was trying to think of an example that could perhaps clarify this, and I hope it doesn't make it more confusing. But we could think of, let's say, a balloon filled with what's that gas that's lighter? What halogen, right?
Helium.
Helium. Okay, yeah, a balloon. Sorry, a balloon filled with helium, right? And let's say the goal is to rise in the atmosphere, right? So think of a balloon filled with helium, and you let it go, and it will rise, right? And now think of an airplane that has the ability to rise or descend, right? So angels are like helium balloons. They are created to rise, i.e., worship God, and therefore they are rising. There is no option of going down, right? There is no choice in the process. Human beings, on the other hand, are like airplanes. They can go up or down, and they need to make the choice of going up or down. And that's perhaps an explanation of the consciousness that we are, well, not an explanation, but a consequence of the consciousness that we are talking about here. The worship of the human being is a conscious choice to worship God. And there is an enormous difference between the worship or appreciation or gratitude or thankfulness of one who has the ability to choose to worship or not worship, be grateful or not grateful, appreciate or not appreciate, right? This is on the one side. And on the other side, we are talking about the worship of a creature that can only appreciate, only be grateful, only worship, right? That's its nature. It's like, maybe it's like automatic, but in the case of the human being, it is a volitional act, a choice that's being made. And when the human being makes that choice, in a sense, the entire creation is coming to its furthest or fulfilling its furthest purpose in terms of worshiping, offering worship to the Creator. And since we were going with the verse, I mean, this was just dawning on me as Colin Hojam was talking, right? The end of that first sentence of the verse is لَعَلَّكُمْ تَتَّقُونَ, so that they, how did they translate it? Let me see. So that they might remain conscious of Him. Now, one explication, one opening up of that word, taqwa, right? Sometimes translated as fear, sometimes as consciousness. The other day when I was reading the Quran and one translation partly benefiting from the tafsir of Ibn Abbas, there I came across this explanation and it was striking to me. So the one definition of taqwa is that you make a contract with somebody, and from there on you are conscious of that contract, and you are scrupulous about holding on to the contract, fulfilling the contract. You fear not fulfilling the contract. You are determined, right? Determined to do your part of the contract. And when we think about the contract with our Lord, that's the covenant, right? Alastu bi rabbikum. He gathered all the souls and he said, am I not your Lord? And we said, qalu bala. We said, yes, you are our Lord. And the concept that corresponds to the word Rabb in there is abd, right? As in the supplication of was Niyazi Masri, right? Anta Rabbi wa ana abduka al-ajiz. You are my Lord and I'm your impotent, powerless slave, right? So that we fulfill the covenant in a sense here.
Really, these are great points, and understanding worship and humans' place, I guess, in the universe and the consciousness is really, they are the key points indeed. If we move towards more like how belief and worship can be connected together in the context of this text, because here it says, you should know that it is worship that instills the tenets of belief in the believers, making them a very part of their character. And then there's an explanation for if matters pertaining to the conscience and reason, again, belief being mainly at conscience and reason, if they are not nurtured and strengthened by worship, which consists of carrying out Allah's commands and abstaining from His prohibitions, they remain ineffectual and weak. And then there's actually an analysis here about the present state of the Islamic world testifies to this. So I mean, what I feel here is but like a cycle of one enforcing the other and the other enforcing the latter. So how should we understand this part and this cycle of enforcement of belief and worship? Kolnabi, any comments that you would like to?
Yeah, but before I actually talk about, these matters which pertain to conscience and reason, which Ustad says that if we don't nurture them, we'll always remain weak and ineffectual. I think we need to be quite sure that, you know, when we're talking about servitude, God doesn't need our servitude.
Indeed.
And we are the ones who need it. We are the ones who have to understand the dynamics of the creator-created relationship in order for us to locate ourselves in the cosmic scheme and to understand why we've been created and by whom. You know, to think that God needs our ibadah or ubudiyah is a bit like thinking that when the doctor at the GP surgery asks us to take a certain medicine, it's because he needs it, you know. You know, doctor, why are you insisting that I take this medication? Is there some reason that, you know, you need me to take them? You know, to ask such a question is absurd. Worshipfulness is necessary because without it, we can't make sense of who we are. You know, we can't make sense of where we are, why we are who we are, and why we are where we are. And there's a lot of W's in there, but I think you get the point. To actually locate ourselves within the cosmic scheme, worshipfulness is necessary. Now, the text says that if we don't nurture these matters, which are matters of conscience and reason, we will always remain weak and ineffectual. And the reason for that is because we won't be able to locate our position in the cosmos and understand it. And when worship is used here, I don't think that Ustad Nursi means only the commonly accepted acts of worship. You know, when he uses the word worship, I doubt very much that he's talking about prayer, fasting, and the other external expressions of worship. And I say this because Ustad Nursi is a very holistic thinker. And when he talks about worship, I think that he's also talking about the sense of ubudiyah, which is supposed to underpin all of the practical rites and rituals of faith, such as prayer and fasting. And as for the present state of the Muslim world, which hasn't improved since his day, I hasten to add, it's not the way it is because people don't pray and fast. You know, the present woeful state of the Muslim world is down to the fact that our minds are colonized and our faith has been secularized. And this is quite clear. And this is what Ustad was scared of in the early days of the Turkish Republic. Our minds have been colonized by modernity, and our faith has been secularized as part of that colonization. We've been deceived into thinking that we are the followers of a religion that's mostly personal and private, you know, with one compartment for acts of worship and another compartment for worldly matters. And this demarcation of life into something which comprises acts of worship on the one hand and worldly matters on the other hand, this is a travesty. This is a caricature, actually, something that is fed by us, fed to us by our enemies in order to take the teeth and the claws from our faith. Ustad says that worship, or rather worshipfulness, is the cause of happiness in this world and the next. And he is talking about this underlying sense of ubudiyah, which means knowing our place in the cosmos and knowing our relationship with as marbub, with our Rab.
Yeah, indeed. It's indeed a very fine point there to understanding worship, right? If it's not really the mechanics, what you're saying, I guess, is understanding the meaning of worship, why we do it, and I guess, yeah, that's that cycle. I guess you need to start somewhere, but I guess starting on the belief side is really important. And I guess another thing that I remember is like, and you can correct me, one of the tafsir, probably Ibn Abbas, when it's like the jinn and men are created for worship. إنما خلقت الإنس والجن إلا ليعبدون. In the tafsir of that, I guess it's mentioned that knowing God is also meant with that that worship إلا ليعبدون. But maybe Mustafa, we can fix my poor skills there, or
Astaghfirullah.
add to this discussion here?
Yeah, astaghfirullah. I mean, yes, the point there is to know, and also we also says whoever knows oneself knows his Lord, right? So that what you were saying is related from Ibn Abbas, and he says that that word illa liya'budun, so that they worship him, should be or can be understood as so that they know him, and knowing and worshiping in that sense are joined together, because one cannot worship a Lord that one does not know. Like, who are you worshiping? If you don't know who you are worshiping, what's the point of worshiping? And I also wanted to add to Colonel Jam's comments, because this section that we are looking at is taken in the, as you mentioned, Isharat al-Ijaz, in the section that Ustad Nursi talks about worship or ibadah, right? The word worship does not fully convey the meaning of ibadah, but we have to use it because that's the word that we have in English. The section that is not in this presentation, but that follows this presentation, immediately starts talking about the universal order in the creation, right? And it says the point of worship is to turn mind's attention to the all-wise, artful maker, a creator, and the point of turning attention to the all-wise, artful maker is to result in submission, right? And submission and obedience brings the slave under perfect universal order. And the perfect universal order relates to the wisdom that is in effect in the entire creation. And the word wisdom there we understand as, or we can understand as, everything in the creation as we observe it, right? Serving a purpose and serving one another, everything being connected to one another, right? What people call or what the naturalists have called mistakenly as natural laws, right? So there are laws that when combined together amount to a universal order. And in the section that follows is immediately, Ustad Nursi is relating the concept of ibadah to submitting to that order. And there was a question in the chat that was about that last sentence: the present state of the Islamic world testifies to this. So one can understand that, and as Colonel Najam also pointed to, probably mistakenly, as, you know, Muslims are not praying, Muslims are not fasting, etc., etc., and that is true. Right? We are not saying that is irrelevant. That is perfectly irrelevant, and inshallah I'll try to come to it at the end of this. Like at some point I had read this study that in Saudi Arabia apparently 16% of the people say that they pray 5 times a day, and this is just, it happened to be about Saudi Arabia. I don't think that the picture would be significantly better if you looked at the rest of the Muslim world. So that is one aspect of this. But when Ustad Nursi is saying here, the present state of the Islamic world testifies to this, I don't think that was the first thing that he had in mind, but rather, you know, following the laws of that universal order enables you to, you know, build steamships and, I don't know, in the industry, and improve your economy and organize your society in a better way, so that the people living in that society are happier and more peaceful, etc., etc. All of these things go into it, right? The perhaps nuance that we still need to maintain is that we cannot say that I'm following the universal order, which is the accumulation or aggregation of the laws that my Lord has created, and therefore when I follow the laws in the creation, I'm obeying my Lord, yet I am not praying. We cannot say that, because explicitly he also said, pray, right? That is in a sense, the symbol, the signifier of our obedience. And again, another concept that will follow these sections here is that the spirit of worship is ikhlas, sincerity, and the meaning of sincerity, as Ustad Nursi says, there is that one worships because one is commanded. Right? So we are commanded to follow the universal order, but we are also commanded to pray. And however, we cannot pray and not follow the universal order and expect to attain happiness in this world and the hereafter either. Right? They're all part of a complete whole. Right? That we need that holistic approach here.
Indeed. Actually, that I'll mention one question that I had in the chat, which probably is connected to this, and then give the microphone to Kulun Hocam, is that there's the question is that what is the key to make worships worshipful? So there is, there is this distinction between being in a worshipful attitude, and I guess you touched upon that, Mustafa Abi, about first about sincerity, but also about following the universal laws that God created to have that. But I wanted to also put it up here so that when Konoja really follows up, we also keep this question in mind: what is the key to make worships worshipful? Do you want to add more to these, Konabi? What do you think?
It's a very good question, because we seem to be fixated on what we understand as acts of worship. But in fact, being an abd is not about carrying out acts of worship or more acts of worship or being more watchful over these acts of worship. And of course, by acts of worship here, we understand the pillars of Islam are generally understood to be comprise acts of worship, such as prayer and fasting and zakat and all of these things. But this term act of worship is very misleading. It's very dangerous, and it can be toxic. Our striving, our efforts, and I think this is an answer to the question, our efforts should not be about doing acts of worship or more acts of worship, but making all acts worshipful. And that means doing everything that we do for the sake of Allah. Obviously, everything that we do that's legitimate. I'm not trying to give the green light for haram. Everything that is licit, everything that is legitimate, we do for the sake of Allah, which means basically not compartmentalizing our life, as I've heard people do, into the worship, acts of worship and worldly life, as though what this worldly life is usually turns out to be things like cooking dinner or washing the car, or having a bath, or going to the shop to buy food. These are seen as worldly acts, but there is no kind of compartmentalization in our conceptual life as Muslims which allows for that secularization of our lives and our time. The acts that we do are either profane or they are pointing to the sacred. We have to sacralize our acts by doing them for the sake of Allah, whether it's praying or whether it's washing the car, whether it's paying your zakat or whether it's cooking dinner for your family. All of these can be made worshipful, firstly, by seeing God in those acts, in other words, by appreciating the divine names which you encounter when you are engaged in those acts, and also doing those acts in His name, for the sake of Allah and not for the sake of your own, base desires. So I think that is addressing that question. How do we make acts more worshipful? First of all, by not being secular, by not compartmentalizing our lives into the worshipful and the worldly, because we have no such demarcation. And I forgot what I was going to say about the question seemed to sort of expand in my head.
But what you said also is connected, right, to what Mustafa Abi has said about
Mustafa
following the general rules.
Mustafa Hoja made some wonderful points. about the about the order. He says that after this section in Isharatul Ijaz, there is a section on the order in the world. You know, when you buy a new computer, it comes with a factory setting, which then you may want to modify according to your own, needs. The universe comes with a setting, a default setting, and that default setting is submission. And if we are, we are in a mess, first of all, because we don't read the signs. And Mustafa was, very adeptly pointing out that, if you look at creation, if you look at the cosmos, you see traces of submission everywhere. There is a Sharia at play, this Sharia takwiniya, the Sharia of how things work. And they work in a way which betokens submission. And we are invited to become part of that, to learn from it, and to align ourselves with it. The point he made is so important. We have to align with it because we are the only being that can opt out. We are the only being that can say, I don't want any part of this. I don't want to submit. I don't want to look holistically. I want to be, myself and independently and do my own thing and operate according to my own criterion. We can't do this as abd. Abd is a contract, as Mustafa Hoja said about taqwa. It's a contract. It's acknowledgement of a relationship that is there, whether you like it or not. We have this Rab Marbub Khaliq Makhluq relationship. And instead of being passive spectators and allowing the world to go by without engaging, we have to engage proactively in this, universe, which is set at submission by default.
Indeed. Yeah, exactly. Great points. And we can probably transition over here, but we also have a question, and I don't want to miss these questions because it is connected to whatever we have been seeing, like the essence of worship and how we should understand worship. And the question is about, because like there could be certain, ideas about this too. The question is about if consistency and quality is more effective than the quantity in terms of worship. And I guess there are certain also traditions about consistency of the worship. But if we want to comment about this also in terms of the worshipful attitudes and I guess transforming all our daily actions into worship, how should we understand this consistency, quality, quantity issue around worship? So Fab, maybe I'll first let you speak on that, and then of course we can another comments you would like to add.
Yeah, I'll try. I probably need to contemplate the matter a bit myself, but this is what comes to my heart, so I'll just pass it on. When we die, and we will all die, and face our Lord, and then inshallah we pass the test and go to Jannah, right? The key matter that we will be preoccupied will not be the how many times we need to wash our mouth while taking wudu, or how many times we say Subhana Rabbiyal Ala when we are in ruku', right? These and I need to put the caveat from the get-go that I'm not in any sense trying to belittle any of this. They are very important. They are essential, right? But there is something more essential, that these are essential because they serve something that's more essential, right? And that is what Kol Nojam is talking about, I think, that attainment of that worshipfulness, right? That attainment of that heart that is sound, qalb salim, right? When we go there, it is the qalb salim, it is the sound heart that will have the ability to partake from the blessings of the paradise, inshallah. Right? So the goal here then is to exercise all of our faculties in order to build that sound heart. Now, at some point, I had injured my shoulder, and they gave me this rubber band. We start from the weakest. It was yellow rubber band, and I was attaching it to the door and pulling and releasing, I don't know, like 15 times, and then stopping and doing another rep. Now, the goal in this is not to pull the rubber band, right? There is no benefit in that rubber band being, stretched, right? The physical therapist did not have any intent, they did not have any need or concern about the band being stretched, right? She could, or was it he or she? I don't remember now. Could have put that band in a machine that could keep stretching it too, right? Now, the point here is for me, like getting that band in my hand and stretching a few times every day is for me to build those muscles. And then the point of building the muscles is not an end in itself either. The point of building the muscles is that so that I can, go about my life. I don't know, like put the plate on the shelf, which at some point I wasn't able to do because of that shoulder injury, and also have a shoulder, a setup of muscles and bones and tissue, etc., in my shoulder, so that it does not keep getting injured. It has its own reflexes and protections against harmful activity, right? So we can think of the heart as a similar muscle, right? The point of getting up in the morning before sunrise, taking wudu and praying, right? First of all, we do it because we are commanded, right? But what we are commanded is to be a slave, ultimately, to attain that state of worshipfulness, and it is the heart that's going to attain it. So then the goal here is to make sure that what we do when we get up and pray 2 rak'ahs in the morning at sunrise, that it affects our heart and builds our heart, metaphysical heart muscles, so that those muscles are able to go about this world while remaining with the Lord. And when we move on to the next world, they are able to do whatever they will be doing there in the paradise in terms of partaking the blessings of the paradise and appreciating the Lord in that perfect setting, inshallah. So how does this relate to the question of amount, quantity, quality, consistency, etc.? Now, I'm a historian. I sit in front of the computer for days on end without moving and typing and doing the same motion, and that's why I got that shoulder injury, right? If I exercise my shoulder every day on a consistent basis, as much as it is due, and then move on doing other things, I won't injure my shoulder. I injured it because I was not doing that, right? So the point then of, for instance, the prayer, or one of the points, now I shouldn't be saying point, I should be saying wisdom, right? Because there are many points, many rationales, and then there is this ultimate rationale that God knows, and we can only surmise about it, right? The wisdom, one of the wisdoms in this is for us to exercise, and we need to do that on a regular basis, otherwise we lose touch, right? And in terms of the quality, since the wisdom, the essence of this thing is about building that relationship with the Lord, that we need to focus on, right? We need not be that imaginary machine that can keep stretching the rubber band, but be human beings that have heart muscles that need to benefit from the exercise that's going on.
Indeed. Jazakallah khair. Thank you. Yeah, it's very good points. I mean, and a lot of valuable points there that are actually also answering that question. And actually, there was another question from a related question from another audience, and I'll read through this, and then I'll give the microphone to Kolnabi. So, and it is actually also talks to somewhat of the, the state of the Muslim world, where we are taught that, what we learn, and then I'll just read what our listener types here. He says, we know the importance of worship as a matter of fact. He says the first thing that we hear from our parents in the Muslim world is about worship. And the question is, what is really holding most of us back from making it more consistent and being consistent worshippers and doing our due diligence in fulfilling the purpose of our existence when we all hear about the importance of worship. So I think, again, there is the knowledge of like how to pray, the need to pray, but then making it a habit or making it really is instilled on our hearts is probably another thing. So how should we really take it so that we are actually, maybe the question could be in another way, like how to make worship a more consistent effort? How should we understand, or how should we really internalize that so that it is actually consistent without some external, reminders for us? And also we can also remember the other question about consistency versus quality. So with all these questions and this, actually it also relates to this text with it is being an exalted, esteemed relation between creator and bondsman. Kolnabi, would you like to comment a little bit on this?
Well, you mentioned that we are, since we are very small, our parents or our guardians inculcate in us the need to worship or the importance of worship,
Yeah.
and they drum that into us. And we can recite in our sleep, their warnings to us and their words of advice to us about worship.
Yeah.
But I think that 9 times out of 10, this inculcation of the importance of worship is looking at worship as a shell. It's looking at the shell of worship rather than the fruit inside the shell, the fruit inside the skin. I'm going to have problems now. Whenever I see Mustafa Hoja, I'm going to be thinking about his yellow elastic band. If you put that elastic band onto some kind of machine and let the elastic band be pulled 30 times, that is about as significant as the prayers of most of us as Muslims, unfortunately, because we have the words and we try very hard to say ad-daleen with the right pronunciation, and we are very mindful of where we put our hands and how many times we wash our mouth when we're taking wudu, but we have no idea what we're saying a lot of the time. And we are fixated on numericals. I have to say that 33 times. I only said it 32 times. I'm going to go to hell now. I'm exaggerating. This is hyperbole, but I think it brings into focus the fact that we are very externalistic in our understanding of worship. Unfortunately, we think of worship almost solely in terms of this objectification of religion into things that we can see. There's a famous saying about British justice. They say British justice has to be seen to be done. Well, with us, worship has to be seen to be done, because if you don't see it, how can you know that we are Muslim? Even if we don't pray, how would you know that we're Muslim? Oh, I know that he's Muslim because he goes to the mosque. Doesn't mean anything. Bowing and prostrating and standing and all of these things, these are the shell. This is the shell of worship. These are the forms that we've been asked to do. And again, like Mustafa, I'm not belittling this. I'm not demeaning it. These are extremely important. If we knew how important the movements are, then we would see them very, very differently. But unfortunately, We don't even have a harfi and a ma'naya harfi understanding of the movements. We see them just as movements. So we treat worship as something which is, objectified, it's concretized, it's externalized, and it is hollowed out with no heart, unfortunately. This is our problem.
Indeed, these are great points about, and also I guess it also opens up a little bit about what we talked about. The present state of the Islamic world testifies to this, and connects the 2 points, right? I mean, there are definitely people, I guess, that don't pray, and there are a bunch of us who pray without much of a context and without much of a end goal of sustaining or enforcing and reinforcing our belief, and instilling those tenets of belief, I guess. Again, that probably feedback mechanism, worship supporting Iman, and Iman supporting worship is probably a good thing that we are coming up to here. We have about 7 minutes left, so I would like to spend in this page a little bit, again, a few things that I would like to point here, and then I'll let our speakers talk about it, because like one thing here is worship, some functions of worship. One is ordering life here and there, and from the Turkish translation what I had seen was more like it is a balancing between the it's a means to balance, or ordering between the lives of a world and the next, so in this world and the next, and again, and the cause of attainment and perfection, both individual on an individual level and on a collective level as a humankind. And then another statement here is it's an exalted, esteemed relation between creator and bondsman. And again, these 3 items are especially a lot of carry lots of importance, I believe. So in any of these things with balancing, because like we talked about balancing, but we talked about also somewhat combining, like the being worshipful, right? Even when we are not doing the acts of worship, right? By following the orders of the laws of the universe that are put by God, and also attainment of perfection individually and collectively. Is it about really worship affecting the rest of our lives? Maybe should we understand it like, if we do worship, the quality of life the rest of the time actually should increase, or should we understand it if, for example, we are praying, and after praying we are still cheating a customer as a shopkeeper? Does it mean that our worship was effective and effectual? I guess, right? The word ineffectual, should we understand it like that? Could we maybe, make this more, make this more solid, make this more apparent by giving these examples? I mean, how should we understand? Like, how should we get that if our worship is really doing these benefits that are being mentioned here, like the enforcing the belief and making things, making our lives more worshipful? Should maybe we should talk a little bit about this in the last few minutes, because I don't think we will have time to go to the rest of the text. Mustafa abi, would you like to give, your comments about?
There's so much that you put in there, so I don't know where to
Yeah,
start.
pick and
How to
choose.
finish.
Pick and choose.
I think I'll just say this. This notion of balance sometimes is understood as bringing to balance a zero-sum game, right? You either have here or there, and if you want to have there, don't have here. Now, what we learn from Ustad Nursi is, as Kolin Hocam alluded to at some point, is that this world has more than one faces, more than one aspect to it. One is what Satnusi calls the mana ismi, which is translated nominative meaning, which looks to the world as this material thing, the materiality of the world, right? But the other aspect of it is the mana harfid, which is the other indicative or other indicative aspect of the world, which points to its creator, right? It points to its creator, to God, right? And in that sense, this world is a means to learning, knowing the Lord, worshiping the Lord, connecting with the Lord, etc., etc. And when we can understand and cultivate this world in that sense, it is not a zero-sum game any longer, and therefore we do not need to think about a zero-sum balancing here and there. It is part of a complete whole. The entire creation, the entire existence that is other than God is a complete whole, and we are a part of that whole that connects this world and the hereafter. And worshipfulness, right, is reaching the ultimate level that we can reach in that complete whole. Again, that includes this world and the hereafter. The distinction between this world and the hereafter, in a sense, becomes rather dim and insignificant, right? Because we are now thinking about the creator and the creation, and we are an important part, a central part of the creation, and we have a responsibility in that creation, and our goal is to fulfill that responsibility. Our goal is to be the best vicegerent of God in the creation and be the best messenger of the creation to the Lord, which is the most universal form of worship that we can imagine.
Okay, thank you. Colin Hocam, would you like to add your final thoughts around these points?
Yes, sorry. Final thoughts. It's about happiness, really. Ustad says that worship or worshipfulness is the cause of happiness in this world and the next. I don't know which, I can't remember what the Turkish word is, the original, but happiness in this world, perfect happiness, is just impossible, right? All that is possible actually is a kind of what I call contented resignation, or you can switch it around and say kind of resigned contentment. It's the kind of contentment that comes from being able to read the world as it was intended to be read, which is with Ma'nai Harfi, to see things as they really are, which means seeing them in the name of the one who creates them. And that is really the only way that we can derive any contentment from this world, a world which is transient and temporary, a world in which life is lived with the constant awareness of death. You can't be totally happy in such a world, but you can, when you've understood what worshipfulness is, arrive at a kind of tentative contentedness, a kind of cautious joyfulness, as it were, rather than any idea of perfect happiness. Because if we think of perfect happiness, that is also setting ourselves up for a big fall. So I thought I should just mention that at the end.
Yeah, exactly. And yeah, it's probably a deep topic itself, like how different is happiness than contentedness. So yeah, they might be the same thing for many people, for this world at least. But yeah, Jazakallah khair, thank you. We are practically out of time. Mustafa abi, would you like to end with a dua unless you have something else to add?
No, I would like to defer to Colin Hocam for that.
Okay, the dua or the...
The dua, yeah.
Oh, okay. Go ahead, Colin Hocam. You have been given the honor. Would you like to...
Sorry, I was away for a second from.
Okay, would you like to make a dua for the...
Inshallah. سبحانك لا علم لنا إلا ما علمتنا إنك أنت العليم الحكيم. Oh Lord, the only knowledge we have is the knowledge that you have bestowed on us, that you have taught us, and you are the omniscient, the all-wise. Please guide us in the correct in the correct use of the knowledge that you give us on loan. And let us understand that what we have from you is only on loan, and that to give back what we have is the essence of true worshipfulness.
Jazakallah khair. Thank you very much, all our speakers and all our attendees. Inshallah, next week we'll continue the same topic, worship. We might cover different aspects of worship, but we'll continue the same topic for the next few weeks,
Well,
inshallah.
thank you for your moderating, as always, very expert.
Jazakallah khair. Thank you very much. Thanks all, and see you inshallah next week. Assalamu alaikum.